Hey, what's up everybody, it's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're playing the new I Didn't Sign Up for This seasonal event, which is an alternate game mode in which all the cards in our deck get changed to random cards that we did not include in our starting deck. That might sound like things are out of our control, but we have a plan, so let's go take a look at the deck. So today we're playing a Skellige Onslaught deck that has just 2 cards that we did not include in our deck from the Skellige Common category, which means those are the only 2 cards that are going to show up in our deck when we actually play a match in this event. Those 2 cards are the Funeral Boat, which we will play early on in the round and get a bunch of these on the board, and then once we have a bunch of those on the board, we'll play some Seagulls, which after dealing damage to our opponents, or if necessary, even our own cards, this will add a bunch of cards to our graveyard, and then with that damage from the Funeral Boats, assuming that can destroy some of our opponent's units, we create a chain reaction where we get non-stop damage, and it is truly incredible. When necessary, we can always use our leader ability to weaken our opponent's cards so that we can more easily get damaged cards from the Seagull, or if necessary, we can even remove cards altogether with Onslaught. Then we also use the Mask of Ouroboros to give us another way to add more cards to our graveyard to give us more ways to get more damage from the Funeral Boats. But that's really all there is to it, just lots and lots of damage. So let's go see it in action. Alright, so going up against Scoia'tael here, and we'll go first. Alright, so I think we have a little bit more Funeral Boats than we do Seagulls, but that's probably still okay, so I think we can make this work. Then we want to start with those Funeral Boats, put them in the melee row. That way, in the future, when we start playing the Seagulls, we can have room for them to get summoned from our graveyard into the ranged row. Alright, they'll go with Vernaseal's Commando, and they got a hand boost on it, and it's also going to get boosted on this first turn as well. With a randomized hand, you'd have to think that, or somewhat randomized hand, you'd have to think that it'd be hard to keep that boosted every turn, but we'll see. So yeah, it's going to be hard to set up those Seagulls, unless they play some things that are not engines, / have not been hand boosted, but we're loading up on more Funeral Boats so that once we do start putting things into our graveyard, we can get more value out of them. Ooh, the trap. Okay. Okay, well, we definitely want units, not traps. So we could potentially deliberately use this Seagull as fodder for this trap. I mean, depending on what we think it is. They did put it next to the Commando. Is it going to be a boosting trap? Or is it a damage trap? In which case, we'd rather not lose a Funeral Boat. I mean, technically, I guess it would activate Funeral Boat if it gets destroyed now. So I guess we'll take our chances. And not immediately destroyed. If it's damage for all the units in a row, that's unfortunate, because obviously we are row stacking all these Funeral Boats, but we're going to be row stacking Seagulls pretty soon as well, so that's the reason for us doing it. Okay, so these cards have not yet been boosted, so they are much better targets for the Seagulls, so we could look to use a Seagull pretty soon. We could potentially get a little bit greedy and put one more Funeral Boat out there, but I think this is probably going to be the last one we want to use. Okay, and some Miner, that is another card that has been hand buffed, and he'll also give a boost out. So I think now is definitely the turn to start dealing damage, because we'd like to get rid of you before you start getting other stuff boosted. So let's maybe use a Mask of Ouroboros, and we'll do that to discard one of the Seagulls, and that'll give us value from these Funeral Boats. And we'll see where that leaves us. Let's get rid of one of you. One of those cards got destroyed, but it was one that had Doomed, which means that it is not going into their graveyard, and therefore we do not get additional damage from the Funeral Boats. But let's go Seagull now. Unfortunately, it means that was also going to be one of our preferred targets for this Seagull, because you're not damaged, but as long as at least one of you gets destroyed, that sets off the Funeral Boats once more, which means all their units are down. So if that is a boosting trap, then it's going to be difficult for them to get value on it. Okay, it's an Antharian, that is also an engine. So, at this point, we need to ask ourselves, is it potentially worth passing here? They don't have much tempo with their leader ability. The big question is just, what is this trap? Maybe it's destroying our biggest card when we play a special, and we aren't going to play any specials at all. And if we pass here, they're going to have to manually flip it, and it'll just get rid of a 1-point Seagull. So that's not a huge deal. We could always use the Seagull here. We're going to have to hit some of our own cards in the process if we do that, which is a little unfortunate. Should give us enough damage to destroy that Antharian, I guess. Maybe to play it safe, but case can be made for just passing here. Alright, it's... Whoa. Vadermaker. With... I mean, obviously it's a random card, so they didn't have much control over it, but there's no weather effects on the board, so that's not a huge deal. They are really keen on playing stuff next to this trap, so it really seems like that is a boosting trap. So if we pass now, that will flip, and what, it's a 4-point boost, which means they'd be at 10, so they need to put up about 17 in one turn, which I'm going to bet they are unable to do, but we'll see. It does not flip here. Oh, that's kind of scary. That's kind of scary. They do have to manually flip the Serpent Trap, but that Shiru was incredible. Wow. That might have been the only possible way for them to win that round so quickly. Alright, so they did play one more card than us in round 1, which might mean they're going to dry pass here. Hard to say definitively. We still have all of our leader ability charges, need to be a little bit protective of those now, because those are going to be some of the best setup for getting the Funeral Boat value. If they dry pass, we'd like to use a Seagull as a throwaway. So, good that we have at least 1 or 2 of those to spare. If they do try to push, then we can start throwing down some Funeral Boats. So I think we can still make this work. They will not play anything. They will dry pass, so let's use a Seagull then, because it is, technically speaking, 1 additional point of carryover. So we'll win round 2. And the same general strategy applies here. We're going to want to load up early on Funeral Boats and then finish off with a bunch of Seagulls. Are we going to need this many? It might be better still to get even more Funeral Boats in case 1 or 2 of them get destroyed. So it's a little greedy, but we definitely want to have at least a few Seagulls. So I think this might be the best balance. Let's start off with some Funeral Boats that have a lot of armor on them so that they are a little bit safer. But that hand buff, again, will make it a little bit tricky to set up the Seagulls, and we might need to rely somewhat heavily on our leader ability to help facilitate the Seagull value in that case. Okay, and it's Farseer. Uh-oh. Okay, that is a card that, of course, synergizes very well with that leader ability, and I'm guessing they spread out those boosts quite a bit in that case, and something has gotten a fair bit of boost from Farseer. So we're going to still play this patiently here, because, well, we could... Tell you what, I think we will hit you with a leader ability charge, so that we get more armor, and therefore make it safer to play our future Funeral Boats in particular, because those we want to stay on the board for a pretty long time. You may very well end up being one of the targets for Seagull going forward. Don't love the 5-point boost, though, because the hope was that you were going to be one of the few things that did not get boosted, but apparently not. Alright, Milva. No, an immunity as well. Okay. So that's not good. I mean, we can potentially still destroy her with random damage from Funeral Boats, but we need some good targets here. Maybe the extra Funeral Boats we went with, rather than loading up on more Seagulls, that could prove to backfire here. Orb of Insight? No. Stop boosting stuff. Play on boosted units, please. And I'm loading up on melee row, because we are hopefully, eventually, going to get a lot of Seagulls in our range row, although that is starting to look less and less feasible. Okay, the healer is only boosted by 1. So I think we're going to play this a little bit patiently. We're going to throw down another Funeral Boat, and then on our next turn, obviously, we're going to start breaking out the Seagulls. At the very least, we can use an Onslaught charge on that healer so that we have at least 1 damaged card with Seagull, and therefore get at least 1 extra card in our graveyard, but that is not boosted. That is not boosted, and we could even use Onslaught directly on this Neophyte to remove it. So there's some pretty serious potential here. Is it best to go, I think we do, with you, 1, 2, 3. We'll add some Seagulls to our graveyard, or 1 Seagull to our graveyard, and therefore get at least 1 damage from each of our Funeral Boats. And Hawker Healer is in range for an Onslaught charge. Farseer, who knows if that'll drop low enough for that to be possible. I kind of doubt it, but we'll start here. See where the damage goes. And if more stuff gets added to their graveyard, then we get a bit of a chain reaction here. If that's all we needed, was to find a way to get the chain reaction started, because then suddenly it really starts to kick off. The tricky thing here, though, is that because they have Last Say, they have at least one card that they can use that we will not be able to do anything to. Now, the immunity, once again, is very well played. That is very tricky for us to work around. However, we can still make it work, because with these funeral boats, we can add seagulls to our own graveyard by hitting our own seagulls, so that still works. And that's good enough to get the removal. Basically, we're just recycling seagulls for the purpose of damage. And more immunity! Wow! I mean, they've done a great job to counter us. To a certain extent, yes, that is just random luck because they didn't have direct control over which cards were going to be in their deck, but I think we have to give them some credit here. So same rules apply here. We aren't even going to be able to use our last leader ability charge, but we're just going to hope that this is enough damage to remove you, and it is, because we can do nothing to stop this last card they play, so we're just hoping they don't have a 32-point finisher, which, with their hand buff, and maybe it's a Glace, it might be able to catch us, but we'll have to see. It's a Guara, I mean, who knows? Unlikely, but it's possible. We're good, we'll hold on, and take the win. Alright, so going up against Skellige here, and they'll go first. Alright, looks like we have a few more funeral boats than we do seagulls, so might try to swap one of those out just to get ourselves more of an even balance. Okay, we won't, but it's still reasonably balanced. They're obviously Onslaught as well, so we'll have to see what they're going for here. Naval Supremacy, I mean, that's actually... that could be something that could help us out here. Making it easier for there to be damaged units. We don't like our opponents having boosts, because that, of course, makes it harder for them to be damaged, and that means harder to set up Seagull and harder to set up Funeral Boat, but hopefully this can make a big difference for us. So we would generally like to start with Funeral Boat. The question is just, do we want to start off with an Onslaught, get you damage, give ourselves some armor? I mean, you're going to get boosted if we do that, so let's say no. So we're going to want to start with Funeral Boats, ideally in the melee row, since we're potentially going to get a bunch of seagulls in the range row later on. Okay, they will immediately remove. Oh, we're also going to get armor. We're both going to get armor from Onslaught with the Naval Supremacy in their graveyard. Which I guess, given that armor, maybe that means there won't be that much damage from Naval Supremacy after all. But since they just played a gold unit, it looks like they might be a quote-unquote normal deck, in that they are not designing their deck to specifically get only a certain subset of cards. Okay, so we'd like to start off with a bunch of Funeral Boats, so that once we do break out the Seagulls, we get decent damage there. The armor is, of course, unfortunate, and the boost/damage potential when that armor gets removed also makes that a little bit tricky. More Junids, what? Okay, I mean, it is more stuff that will take damage, though, because that's not a pirate or boat, so no armor on you, and that means more armor for us. We won't be damaged, so even if you have more Junids, you're going to need to do more damage before you can actually get removal from them. They'll pass here. Okay, so I think the right play in that case is Seagull 1 and 2. We're probably going to end up hitting the armor on probably both of these guys in the process, so it could be worth hitting one of them directly with Seagull and just accepting that the armor is going to go away. There is actually a case to be made for hitting this Funeral Boat, because that would create additional Seagull, and in doing so, more damage from the boats. So I think I'm actually going to do that. And since you don't have armor, this is the one we're going to hit. seagulls come out, and after that has happened, okay, we do still need to take one more turn, fair enough. That should still be fine. And at this point, shouldn't need to be anything too crazy. I think we can just go Seagull onto this Junid, and doesn't matter that much if we aren't getting you to be damaged. And I think hitting this Funeral Boat might actually be the best option, because there's a chance that, that will definitely add one more Seagull to our graveyard. If we don't destroy any units in the process, then we potentially get more Seagulls carrying over, hanging out in our graveyard, that can pop out on a later occasion. Granted, we are going to remove Junid, so the Seagulls are going to come out. So be it. Okay. So that's good enough for us to win round 1. Okay, and definitely more Funeral Boats than we have Seagulls at this point. And if we had to choose between one of them, I think having more Funeral Boats is probably better, so this is okay, but maybe we try getting one more Seagull. And we're probably going to dry pass. We did play more cards than our opponent, and out of curiosity, 3 more turns of Naval Supremacy. Okay, so we might be able to gain some armor on these guys, which could potentially be a little bit useful. Alright, it's Herkia, who will not take any damage, because she does have armor. They can use one more throwaway. Instead, they choose to discard altogether, and they'll win round 2. Alright, so again, I think we're a little more boat-heavy than we are seagull-heavy, but I think that's probably okay if we had to choose between those two things, so this looks fine. We also have yet to use any of our leader ability charges, so we can use that for additional setup if we need it. Okay, Ulula, I think there's still one more charge. To have her take damage, give us some armor, which is useful. She does have some damage potential. There is a case to be made, even, for removing her altogether with double leader ability right now. I'd really rather not have to do that, but she does have some long-term damage potential. Maybe... does she ignore armor? She does have some armor-ignoring abilities here. And there is still one more turn of Naval Supremacy. Okay. So we might still want to play our biggest armor Funeral Boat here. Make it a little bit harder for them to remove it. And we probably will hit her with an Onslaught on our next turn. Just like to already have some Funeral Boats on the board when we do that, and maybe get the death blow. Oh, uh-oh. Okay. This is becoming very problematic very quickly. We'd like to have some Funeral Boats on the board so we get more value when we do that, and maybe, you know, get a death blow with a Seagull so we can get the Seagulls out from our graveyard in the process as well. But this is making me suddenly very nervous. So, well, I think on one hand we hit you, we get more armor on everybody, which, do that early, that's pretty nice. On the other hand, hit you, and that means it only takes 2 turns of Seagulls to remove you, which is kind of nice. If we're willing to... oh, I think we go other highly armored Funeral Boat here. But let's hit you. We'll get some armor first. Ulula's potential to circumvent some of that armor does make that concerning. So this is largely a matter of who chooses to make their move first. Oh, and okay, they were just waiting to get Dogger on the board. This is going to be an issue. Okay, so we want lots of Funeral Boats on the board so we can get extra damage when we do actually initiate our string of damage by getting stuff into the graveyard. We can do that by hitting Ulula with a leader ability charge if we need to. So we could potentially go Funeral Boat and then hit Ulula, and we'd get 2 damage, which is kind of lackluster, but Ulula does still have some long-term potential here. Would have loved if we had our other Funeral Boat stay on the board so that we could get more value when doing that, but I think we might need to play it a little bit safe here and do that. Just in case they have more damage potential. Okay. Now that is annoying that they're doing the healing, yes. However, you are not immediately threatening the removal on any Funeral Boats, so that's good. So I think now we go back to being patient. Because ideally, we would get all the Funeral Boats on the board before we start breaking out the Seagulls. Okay, Magic Compass, who knows what this is going to do. More okay, now we're talking about enough healing that this is going to be tough to get the death blows on the seagulls. We should be able to get damaged cards, because just hit the Flaminikas. They can't heal themselves, but since there's two of them, they can heal each other. But just putting the seagulls into our graveyard in the first place can hopefully be a pretty big deal for us. Sigvald. That is actually a humongous counter. That might have been a win condition for them, because he will just absolutely absorb all that damage we are about to hit them with. So we are pretty much just going to cross our fingers that Sigvald does not happen to be the card that gets targeted by most of the random Funeral Boat damage, but we do not have control over that. So hoping for some other good targets to receive damage. And not loving that we are very likely about to lose a Funeral Boat here. It was a damaged card, still is to a certain extent, but alright, that's all the Funeral Boats we're going to get here. So we're going to need to pull the trigger on the seagulls now. Let's play them in the melee row, because if we can get any of these cards destroyed, then we'll get the seagulls summoning out into our range row, so we should leave room there. Let's target the Flaminikas, I think, since they can only get healed once per turn here. And then Bjorn they can potentially replay, so the damage might be completely insignificant. Definitely don't want to hit Sigvald. Basically, doesn't matter all that much who we hit with the third target, but we are putting cards into our graveyard, which means we are getting some damage. It just pains me every time I see Sigvald get hit. Delirium, this time they're getting golds. You've got to be kidding me. How many freaking Flaminikas are you going to get here? It's too much healing. It's too much healing. Okay, well. We're gonna give it a shot. Okay, I mean, you're gonna get healed 3 points per turn, so it's, I guess it's possible that right here, right now, we might get enough damage to remove you, but we'd really like to get, we'd really like to get rid of one of these Flaminikas, if possible. Come on, one of the Flaminikas. There we go. At least one down, and then that gives us a bit of a chain reaction, because if one card goes into the graveyard, then, well, it gets our seagulls out from our graveyard, and it triggers more Funeral Boat procs. Now the Flaminikas suddenly might be more possible for us to outright remove, once again. Svalbod Priest, next to Sigvald, is a decent combo. Okay, but now we're going for Seagull here, and at this point, Dogger actually is looking like the easiest card for us to take out. So, fingers crossed, we get, yes, one of the Flaminikas down, and Dogger as well. Okay, now it's really starting to pay off for us. As we're seeing, you get one of those cards into the graveyard, the chain reaction starts, and then there is no stopping us. Alright, so going up against Nilfgaard here, and they'll go first. Okay, and we have a lot more Funeral Boats than Seagulls right now, and that's probably, if anything, the way we'd prefer to be leaning, but might not be a terrible thing if we had one more Seagull. I think we can still make this work, I guess. Alright, they're going to start with the Dow, which is actually not good for us, because that shield does make it difficult to get the damaged cards for Seagull, and that's how we set up the Funeral Boats, and high base power, so that even if we do eventually break through that shield, gonna be quite a bit of damage we need before we can have this go into graveyards, and that's how we get the chain reaction. So we'll start setting up some Funeral Boats, but hopefully they'll play some better targets for us to go after. Okay, Johnny is a much better target, but they boost him with the stratagem, and that makes him now no longer a good target, because it's going to take a lot of damage for him to become damaged, and a lot of damage before he's destroyed. So we will patiently wait for a good opportunity to break out the Seagulls. Alright, they're going to use a leader ability on a Funeral Boat, and that's not a terrible thing, because it just seemed like this round was not starting off that well for us, and okay, well, throw in a good special to combine with Johnny, and I'm thinking we're probably just going to drop one more card and keep this round really short. Because they won't have the stratagem in a future round, so that'll help a lot. They won't have a leader ability anymore either, so that should make things much easier for us. I guess we'll still go Funeral Boat here. You could make the case you go for Seagull, because that is the tiniest bit of carryover, but, you know, there's maybe a chance. If they play something good for us to go after here, we could still push a little bit further in this round. Like, suddenly... Oh, I really wish they had a bonded unit. A 1-power bonded unit that we could go after, because that would have been perfect. But at least this guy doesn't have any boosts in it, just 4 power. Much easier to destroy that. Especially if we're willing to use a leader ability charge. That could open the door for us a bit. So, alright. I'm taking the bait. We'll go a little bit further here. Okay, Saerquan, though, destroying a Funeral Boat, right? They have enough damage for it? I mean, low enough power that this is a good target for us to go after. So if we had more Funeral Boats on the board, this would be decent. We could destroy you pretty easily. Once we do that, we could probably destroy you pretty easily, and these guys will take enough damage in the process that we can get the chain reaction going. But at this point, I think we've lost too many Funeral Boats. We just don't have enough setup anymore for that to work, so I think we pass here. So that means they'll win round 1. And we draw into entirely Funeral Boats here. So, I mean, I think they're more important than the Seagulls. We certainly want to have at least a few of those. But maybe even one more. If they were to drive past, they'd have at least one throwaway card. But they did play one more card than us in round 1. Seagull is probably the throwaway we want to use, since that is a tiny bit of carryover. But let's see what approach they take here. Alright, it's... Oh. We're going to Brockie, which... without dragon setup, is a decent target for us to go after. So, I mean, you could even make a case just use a leader ability charge now. Obviously, putting it down to 1 power means it's very easy for us to go after it with the Seagull, and we can get the death blow in that case, which would be great for Funeral Boat setup. But it also just gives us armor, which I'm a little concerned about you having potentially a little bit of damage. Well, unless you have quite literally 0 charges. You might quite literally have 0 charges, but they might have damage in the future. So it might be overkill. It might be overkill. But while we have a hand full of boats and pirates, why not? Play it a little bit safe. Alright, Mata actually, I think, helps us quite a bit. Because that just means more setup. More ability to set up, because we can certainly play the engine game. I guess if you call a Funeral Boat... I don't know, are Funeral Boats technically an engine? You know what I mean. Alright, it's another one. Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, I mean, suddenly... And we know this is not going to have any charges either, so that's functionally just a 4-point body. So, I think we just throw another Funeral Boat out here, and we have 3 very good targets, because none of them have been boosted. So we can use the Seagull very effectively, and that last one there gets destroyed in the process, and that means more cards in the graveyard on that turn, and more damage from the Funeral Boats. So if they keep on pushing here, we could have a lot of luck with that. Alyssa Henson, they did have a somewhat annoying special card they played in round 1 to remove some Funeral Boats, right? What are the chances they're going to be able to replay that? I don't know, but that's another card that now is on the board that has not been boosted. Does have higher power, and therefore, if we just play another Funeral Boat here, then we would not outscore them, I don't think. So, it's a little preemptive for the Seagull when it comes to full-length round setup, but I think, assuming that this might be the only play we need to make to finish off this round, maybe it's worth doing. So, definitely want to hit the 1-power copy. We'll hit the 4-power copy to get that weaker as another one that can hopefully go into the graveyard at the end of this turn, and then just hit one of the 6s. And the chain reaction should activate here. So everything is destroyed. We've gotten some more armor on the cards in our hand, which is, I guess, a different form of carryover. We'll get this Seagull into our graveyard, which is also a tiny little bit of carryover. And they'll pass. So not only do we have that little carryover, we now have 1 card advantage going into round 3. Alright, so we are still a little more funeral boat heavy here. I think it's, what, 5 funeral boats to 4 seagulls. And the seagulls, as you just saw there in the previous round, are for the most part finishers. So we don't need that many of them, as long as we have decent funeral boat setup, and especially against Nilfgaard. Well, I mean, they've already used their leader ability, so I don't know how much more control they're realistically going to have. We could maybe make the case for getting another funeral boat instead of that seagull, so, alright, this is a little risky. But it turns out they do not think they can stop us. They will forfeit, so we'll take the win. Alright, so going up against monsters here. And they'll go first. Alright, it looks like we have a few more seagulls than we do funeral boats, and if anything, we probably prefer the other way around, so let's see if we can get an extra funeral boat. There we go. Alright, so they'll start with a Rot Fiend. Now, that's actually a little bit concerning because it's not really a card we want to damage, so hopefully they'll have other, better targets for us to go after later. But at least for now, we're going to start off with funeral boats, and a whole lot of funeral boats, primarily in the melee row, so that we can leave space for seagulls to get summoned into the range row later on. Oh. Okay, so obviously their deck is randomized, at least to a certain extent, but you can see the direction they're trying to go in here. There are some synergies they may be able to get if they can do some consuming. Okay, the hatchling, though, that's better. That's a card we are okay with hitting. Now, the boosts and the armor do make it a little bit harder to get the value on things like Seagull, but we'll see if we find a way to break through. Might need to resort to using a leader ability charge there. Alright, Hideous Feast. More boosts. The drone is actually not bad. Now, unfortunately, it's a token, so it's not going to go into their graveyard, which means it's not going to activate the funeral boats, but it does at least work with Seagull. So I think what we'll do is we'll try one more funeral boat, and then we will probably need to choose next turn if it is time for Seagulls, because if not, then we are probably going to need to bail on this round. Okay, it's Mamuna. They have anything in their graveyard? I didn't think so. Okay, but that is actually a very good card for us to go after with Seagull, so this is looking okay. I think we go 1, 2, 3. We'll play our initial Seagull in the melee row so that we have plenty of room for the other ones to spawn into the range row. And so, the Rot Fiend's probably going to get destroyed. We're going to have to just live with that, I think. And hopefully now one of the Seagulls ends up getting hit with the damage. And they realize they can't handle it, so they will almost immediately forfeit. So there's a look at a Skellige Funeral Gulls deck for the new I Didn't Sign Up for This seasonal event. If you liked the video, then make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and leave a comment down below letting me know which are the cards, archetypes, and factions we should experiment with next. And take a look at our I Didn't Sign Up for This seasonal event playlist to see previous decks that we've used in this event as well. Not to mention, we're teaming up for our Balance Council votes this season, so take a look at this video to see how we're voting this time. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.